Hello, friends. I so wish I could be in Lisbon to celebrate the launch of Mais Liberdade. I very much look forward to visiting Portugal again when the world turns back on and we can travel freely. The reason I wish I could be with you, besides enjoying your excellent Portuguese food, wine, and conversation, is that it's not easy to communicate via the internet the enthusiasm I have for the Mais Liberdade initiative and my anticipation of the good things that will come from it. It's a cliche to say that this is a turning point in politics or world civilization or whatever. People say it too often, and it's rarely even remotely close to true. I honestly think that now is different, that this time is as pregnant with change as were the late 1980s, when the crumbling of Europe's totalitarian states became evident and a cascade of changes followed. We saw liberal democracies flourish in much of the world. Dictatorships yielded to constitutional democracies, and poverty dwindled as trade became freer and prosperity more general. Some even thought that no challengers to liberal democracy could emerge, that it was the end of history. I didn't find that thesis at all persuasive, but I admit that I have been surprised at the rise in recent years of ideas and movements that I thought had been finished in 1945. The ideas of fascist and National Socialist thinkers are back in vogue, albeit in more fashionably dressed up, postmodern versions. Those ideas are active again. In recent years, we've witnessed the rise of explicitly illiberal and authoritarian populism, which is posing a serious challenge to liberal democracies and to the possibility of societies that are peaceful, pluralistic, and prosperous. The far left and the far right perceive each other as enemies, but they share important common foundational ideas. The authoritarian poles of the spectrum are enemies primarily in the sense that two gangs may be enemies, fighting over turf and the ability to exploit resources from a subdued population. They claim to represent the people against the elite, but as political scientist Jan Werner Müller noted in his 2016 book, What is Populism? Quote, in addition to being anti-elitist, populists are always anti-pluralist. Populists claim that they and they alone represent the people, close quote. They differentiate between the people and the enemies of the people, a phrase that one hears increasingly on both left and right. In doing so, they follow the National Socialist legal theorist Carl Schmitt, who posited that the foundation of, quote, the specific political distinction can be reduced to that between friend and enemy, close quote. That friend and enemy distinction animates both the left and the right. The right-wing followers of Schmitt posit immigrants, Roma, Jews, foreigners, ethnic or sexual minorities, bankers, and allegedly cosmopolitan elites as the enemy. The left-wing followers posit structural conflicts between classes, genders, races, and identities. Slavoj Žižek, a leftist follower of Schmitt, for example, posits what he calls, quote, the unconditional primacy of the inherent antagonism as constitutive of the political, close quote. The influential populist theoretician Ernesto Laclau, who has been so important for populist movements in Latin America and in Spain, applies Schmittian thinking quite directly. He states that in the case of populism, the people are constructed by means of, quote, a frontier of exclusion that divides society into two camps, close quote. Thus, I quote again, the people in that case is something less than the totality of the members of the community. It is a partial component which nonetheless aspires to be conceived as the only legitimate totality, close quote. That's the core claim of populism, channeled from a National Socialist ideologue via a post-Marxist populist philosopher into contemporary political practice. One political figure who has internalized Schmitt's thinking without ever having heard of Carl Schmitt, much less having read him, is Donald Trump, who speaks of the media as, quote, the enemy of the American people, and who blurted out in a casual comment the core idea of populism. Quote, the only important thing is the unification of the people, because the other people don't mean anything, close quote. So the contest of politics is thus between the people and the other people, who don't mean anything. In place of rules, which are obviously foundational to the rule of law, the populists of left and right propose the one will of the people, which they insist that they alone represent. They claim that they and they alone express the will of the true people who have one will, one voice, one common interest, and, as it so often works out, one leader and one vote, one time. What lurks behind their understanding of law is radically different from the liberal view. They embrace the view of the field marshal and two-time president of Peru, once by coup d'etat and once by election, Oscar Benavides, who famously proclaimed, "For my friends, everything. For my enemies, the law." Close quote. They seek to replace the rule of law, which is constituted by general rules, with mere force. Free societies are not founded on the one will of the people or on great leaders, for a free society doesn't have only one will, and certainly not only one leader. Free societies are pluralistic and variegated. They contain many interests and values that are negotiated through discussion and deliberation, through democratic political processes, and through free exchange and free markets. Mais Liberdade's commitment to work on behalf of the market economy and individual freedom, on behalf of democracy and the rule of law, represents a better future for the people of Portugal. That entails offering reasoned studies that are well-grounded in empirical research and that will demonstrate the results of policy choices. The world is governed by cause and effect, not by magical exertions of will. And Mais Liberdade will use reason to present to the population of Portugal what the alternatives are and what the consequences are of choosing one policy or another. In addition, promoting economic literacy, another of Mais Liberdade's core functions, will help tremendously to promote a culture of democratic reason and a future of wealth creation. Economic literacy entails understanding the existence of trade-offs, of the unseen costs of policies, and of their unintended consequences. It means understanding that the world is not composed solely of zero-sum transactions, where every gain is offset by a corresponding loss, but also contains the far more common negative-sum transactions, in which the sum of the payoffs is less than zero, and positive-sum transactions, such as free exchanges for mutual benefit, where the sum of the payoffs is positive. Mais Liberdade is focused on transforming the negative-sum transactions that plague Portugal into positive-sum transactions that will yield general prosperity. In an important sense, the programs of Mais Liberdade engage the prefrontal cortex of the brain, the seat of reason and deliberation, whereas the populists engage exclusively the amygdala, the seat of fear and aggression. Mais Liberdade's mission is vitally important to the survival of democracy and of free exchange of ideas, goods, and services, not only in Portugal, but in Europe, not only in Europe, but among Lusophones globally, and not only among Lusophones, but for an entire world. I congratulate Carlos Pinto and my other friends in Mais Liberdade for this launch. My colleagues and I, around the globe, look forward to welcoming Mais Liberdade into the global family of liberal think tanks. Atlas Network currently includes 461 active partners in 97 countries, and that number is growing, not only thanks to the addition of Mais Liberdade, but to others in Asia, Latin America, North America, Africa, Oceania, and Europe. I also look forward to offering my humble services in connecting liberals in Portugal with that global network of liberals. We understand that liberty has friends on every continent and in every country, and that relations among nations and peoples can be mutually beneficial. Unlike the populists who see in foreigners, in other religions, in other nations, and in other ways of life only enemies, we know that there are friends of liberty in every society, and we are united with those friends in our common love of peace and liberty, and of the widespread and shared prosperity that they bring. Congratulations on this launch.